I believe that most women would give up all of the dick that they've gotten for just one partner that they could have for life. Like one loving, caring partner that they could be in a healthy relationship for life. I feel like that's something that most women would trade all of the dick they've gotten, whether it felt like a scratch or the best thing ever, like just for that. But the whole thing about men getting retroactively jealous of a woman's sexual past, I honestly don't think so. And I don't say this because
the royal penis is clean, Your Highness.
Welcome to the Breakdown Podcast, where I talk about love, sex, and relationships from a guy's perspective, as well as a bunch of other guy shit. The man on the mic is a man who likes his women the same exact way he likes his yogurt. He is also a man who may include jumping to conclusions to his cardio routine. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. And I am here because y'all just can't seem to understand men. Again. And someone has to speak on it. Again. But interestingly enough, it's not for the exact reasons that you think it is. Like this time it's a little bit different. This one's a little bit more intimate, a little bit more deep. And I aim to show that men don't only care about their hard side, but, they also have a soft side as well. Like, men can be soft. Men do have, particularly sweet things that they wish for in future. And I aim to speak on that in a little bit because it seems like people don't think that men actually love some of the things that women say that they do love. And you liking them doesn't make you any less masculine or any more feminine. And I do intend on getting to that, and I do intend on explaining exactly why I believe that. So I hope you can listen all the way till the end so that you can pick up on some of the tidbits and some of the softer sides that men tend to have. And should you like the episode, should you not like it, should you want to give a different form of feedback, or should you want to suggest a potential topic, then the social media links are always in the description. They rarely ever change, and my DMs are always open. So you can slide into the DMs, make your suggestion, and don't worry, I will see it and I will attend to it accordingly. And should you end up on that page, whether you want to tell me something in the DMs or not, a nice follow would be appreciated, You've already gotten there. Following is basically free. It's not like you'll be charged for shit. And you don't even burn calories just hitting the follow button. So if you can hit the follow button and follow me so that I can get more followers, which can make me look a little bit more credible, so I can get guests on the show, so that I can have more interviews. If you could do that, that would be great. I would really, really appreciate that because, there's clearly a lineup of good things that can come the more people follow me. Also, I kind of like the idea of new followers, but that's kind of besides the point. Although, speaking of liking things, I do need to get to the main topic where there is quite a bit of like and quite a bit of want that is there. But before I can get to any of that, I want to talk about the idea of sex and more so the idea of the body count. Now, I normally don't like talking about it all that much, even though I do actually have a clip on IG on the podcast page where I do talk about the concept of the body count. It was actually a pretty funny video that I did about 5 years ago. And, there's some tidbits that are in there and, it was meant to be particularly light and fairly humorous. So, you can watch it to enjoy. But with that said, I normally don't like talking about the body counts a lot. Actually, I'm a very big advocate for not discussing other people, or should I say not discussing each other's body counts if you're in a relationship. But this is one of those things that as time goes by, it seems like we don't really know what to do with as far as information is concerned. But I recently stumbled across a tweet by the man known as Adam Lane Smith, who is an attachment psychologist, quite good in fact, at his job, where he was busy talking about the body count and why men seem to have some bit of a problem about the woman's body count. And I have a couple of thoughts on it, but before I can even mention my thoughts, let me just read the tweet, then I can give my feedback on it, because I feel like dude might have missed the mark on this one. So he says, and I quote, "Men get retroactively jealous of a woman's sexual past because they think about how much hypothetical fun they would have if they did what she did. But most women would trade their whole past for one loving partner for life. It's a huge difference in perspectives. This is not a comment telling men to suck it up or commenting on body count expectations, just the different way men and women view body count, because the perspective really is so vividly different. One more time. This is not a comment on reproductive guarding in men or examining each other's body counts for mate selection. it's a perspective on their own body counts. Retroactive jealousy in men is specific in this way. She has more than me, and that makes me deficient. End quote. Okay, now, normally whenever I am on this podcast, and I feel like I've probably said this before, like I will try to discuss people's opinions and comments in equal measure. So regardless of whether I like you or I don't like you, like if you said something that is good, at least to my ears, if it's something that I believe in, I'll side with you and I'll speak on it. If you say something that isn't good, whether I like you or I don't, I will still speak on it. It's not really about whether I like the person, it's about the content of what they say. And just the same way I have discussed people that I may not seem to like all that much on the podcast, and I've spoken about something that they've said that I do agree with, I've also been very open to speaking about some of the things I don't agree with by people that I not only admire, but people who've even been guests on this podcast. And Adam Lane Smith is someone that I admire quite a bit. As an attachment psychology, I feel like he has actually really amplified the subject of attachment psychology with a lot of the tweets and the podcast episodes on different podcasts that he's been on. But in this particular case, where he's busy talking about the body count for men, I don't think he gets the point particularly. Like, don't get me wrong, I will still mention the bit where he actually says something that I feel is very true. And that is the idea that most women would trade their whole past for one loving partner for life, which I believe is actually quite true. I believe that most women would give up all of the dick that they've gotten for just one partner that they could have for life. Like one loving, caring partner that they could be in a healthy relationship for life. I feel like that's something that most women would trade all of the dick they've gotten, whether it felt like a scratch or the best thing ever, like just for that. But the whole thing about men getting retroactively jealous of a woman's sexual past, I honestly don't think so. And I don't say this because, I can speak for every man, but I feel like I can speak for a lot, if not most men, when I say that this isn't entirely true. And I'm not saying that Adam Lane Smith isn't a man. He is, of course, but I feel like for him, because if I'm not wrong, I think the guy is married, he probably wouldn't have a particularly proper idea of this entire thing because he hasn't had to deal with the issue of discussing body counts. Now, when you look at the idea of body counts for men, and I'll try to explain this in as best of a way as I can, and it doesn't have to be 100% accurate, but I do think that, at least from the discussions I've had with a bunch of other men, that it is fairly, close to, if not on point. The idea of the body count for men is usually attached to conquest, if I can put it like that. Conquest in that, when you look at it from a guy's perspective, the higher the body count, the more this man has accomplished as far as, sexual conquest is concerned. It's not really an accomplishment, but, it does kind of give the idea that you are better because you have managed to convince a couple of different women to let you hit it. So, for example, like let's say you've slept with 100 women, all right? Not that I'm saying you should. Personally, I think by the time you're getting there, you have other issues besides, just conquest. When you look at that figure of 100 from a typical guy's perspective, the underlying thought process that's there is that you managed to convince 100 women to let you hit it. Like, you managed to, convince 100 women to open their legs, split them cheeks, and let you smack that, all right? And essentially, convincing a woman to sleep with you is not an easy thing. Not unless if the woman is already ready and wants to give it to you, of which that doesn't happen to most guys. Usually, it requires some work. So if you manage to bed 100 women, then you're particularly good at, convincing women to let you hit it. All right, that's sort of the underlying thought process. But now that's from a guy's perspective. But when we look at it from, a woman with 100... or even let's say 50, doesn't have to hit 100, the thought process around conquest kind of shifts because considering that it's a guy that has to talk to the woman to kind of open her legs, essentially if a woman slept with 50 guys, she opened herself up and, she basically split her legs for 50 different dudes to come and, go in there. And the thing is, like, when you look at that, it's okay, so you allowed 50 guys to screw you. That is now what makes it seem as though like it's a pretty big issue. It's not that the guy was like, oh, I allowed 50 women to shag me. It's I managed to get 50 women to sleep with me. But when it's on the woman's end, it's I allowed 50 dudes to get in and bang me. So when guys look at it that way, it all of a sudden seems like you're the one that was giving it up. And if you're giving it up to 50 guys, then you haven't seen yourself, or you're not carrying yourself as someone that is valuable enough that someone should put in a bunch of work, or you're saving yourself for someone particularly special that you'll give it to. Then you can also pair that up with the cultural understanding that like virginity is a pure thing, and it's almost like a white sheet, and when you sleep with multiple people, that means that it's been stained a bunch by other different people. And so, like, the idea of a woman with a high body count is that not only is she not pure, but she's very stained. And, no one wants anything that is very stained. So when the whole discussion of a woman with a high body count comes up, that's kind of the things that will usually come up. The other bit is, there's a likelihood that in all of the people that she slept with, there's probably someone that or that might be, known to the both of you, such that if you do end up with her, like, you might have put in a bunch of work so that you can be with her, so that you guys can have something that is like formal, like you guys are in like a relationship and everything, and she might have made you wait. But if she slept with all of those guys, there's some guys that probably got to know her and in hours were banging. Like, there were guys that she probably met and without putting any effort, were basically in the sheets with her. There's guys that were basically doing it with her and, all manner of things, but essentially that it was easier to get with her than for you, who has put in the work, that probably had to go on a couple of dates with her, has basically had to do. So they can look at her and think about how they managed to smash for barely anything, and you had to put in a bunch of effort so that you can bag the babe. So, like, that whole thought process of, as someone once said, buying a used car for new car prices is kind of what tends to irk quite a number of guys that look at it like that. And that's essentially why guys tend to have an issue with women who have a particularly high body count. But with all of that said, I'm a very big advocate of not talking about body counts, because I've never really seen anywhere, not unless if the both of you have very, very low body counts and that you have very low body counts each, people won't look at the numbers if they actually mention the true numbers, and no one is going to feel some type of way. It's not very common for such a thing to happen. And I feel like the moment people start talking about, my body count is this, my body count is that, it just opens a can of worms that cannot be closed again. So I'm a very big advocate that people shouldn't discuss body counts as much. Not that, you should be fucking around regardless of gender, because it's not like either gender wants someone with a high body count, but rather just the fact that it's essentially a Pandora's box that need not be opened, because either side might feel like the other might be a little bit stained in some way, and even though they don't, it just never ends well. I've never seen two people talking about body counts and it's like, oh great, you have a high body count. Oh, me too, I love it. So if it's not helping make shit better for the two of you, I don't think it's one of those things that should be discussed. But that's just me, and I don't want to speak on it too much, so I'm going to leave it at that and move it on to our main topic of this episode, which involves marriage. And yes, I know I'm not a married individual, I shouldn't be speaking on marriage, but this is more in line with wanting marriage, not necessarily being married, but just wanting it, and the idea of who wants marriage more. So as I was on Reddit not too long ago, I stumbled across a particularly interesting Reddit post where people were busy discussing who it is that wants marriage. Now, I am going to read the post itself before I can get into my thoughts on the entire thing, because I feel like it does kind of open the whole idea of men and wanting and liking the idea of marriage, as well as women. So let me just read the post real quick. So it says, and I quote, "I've often heard men say that women are desperate for marriage, especially as they grow older. There's this narrative that once a woman reaches a certain age, she becomes less desirable to men, and that her desire for marriage becomes a sign of panic or pressure. But here's what I've noticed. Many of the men I've come across seem to want marriage just as deeply, sometimes even more than women. They speak about stability, companionship, and the longing to build something meaningful, yet they rarely say it out loud. Instead, they hide behind jokes or vague dismissals of commitment. So I wonder, Is it that women are simply more open about wanting marriage while men are taught to suppress that desire? Do men pretend not to care while quietly hoping someone will choose them for the very thing they claim to reject? Maybe it's not about who wants marriage more, but about who feels safe enough to admit it. End quote. Okay, now having read this post, and I'll also add, there was another bit of info that I received not too long ago, where there was a recent study that claimed that apparently it's not the female egg that has a biological clock, it's the male sperm. And I haven't gotten down to reading it, but I probably will at some point just to see if it is actually very true. With all of that said, I tend to think that men probably might want marriage. But okay, let me start by trying to answer the questions in reverse. Okay, is it more about who wants marriage more, or is it about who feels safe enough to admit it? I personally don't think that there's any issue with admitting that you want marriage. I don't think there's anything wrong with men, provided that you are in a friend group of some sort that is positively healthy in any sort of way. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that you do want to get married. Because for us guys, we always talk about, when you have kids, when you have a wife and kids, when you grow old, blah, blah, and everything. And all of those things are kind of expected to be within a marriage. So not unless if you and your boys are specifically having discussions of not getting married and who would want to get married, the idea of marriage is garbage, I don't think there's anything unsafe about the discussion of wanting to get married. I just think that women don't normally hear men expressing that desire to get married up until they want to propose. That is when you will know that this man has a desire to get married to that particular woman, So essentially, it's just that we don't discuss it as much. The fact that we would want to get married, the fact that we do want to get married, or the fact that we are expected to get married at some point, just because it's not really something that we put that much of a discussion on. Essentially, we can discuss about a bunch of other things, but we just don't discuss it as often. But with that said, the other question was, do men pretend not to care while quietly hoping someone will choose them for the very thing that they claim to reject? I don't think men pretend not to care. I think it's just that there's this underlying belief that's been coming out lately where, when it comes to marriage, men have all the options, blah, blah, blah. So just give it time. A man will always be viable in the dating market, provided they're doing okay for themselves, even as they're growing older. So it's not really a lack of care for marriage, but rather a lack of care that you may not have a partner now, in that you know very well that you will have options later. So even though you haven't nailed down someone right now, you can probably wait, or you can probably bag someone a little bit later. And that's kind of where the whole underlying idea is. Then the next question was, is it women that are simply more open about wanting marriage while men are taught to suppress that desire? I could say that women are taught to talk about marriage and weddings a lot more than men are, because those are discussions that affect them on a regular day-to-day. But is it that men suppress the desire? I wouldn't say that men suppress the desire, but we just don't talk about it per se. And with that said, I believe that there's always been this idea that women want marriage and men have to do it. Men have always believed that, at some point in your life, you're gonna get married. You kind of have to get married. With women, it's you should be doing this, this, and this. When you get married, when you meet this guy and he loves you and everything is great, then he'll want to marry you and shit. And the truth of it is, when you hear people being told that ever since, they're kids, and guys aren't being told about marriage, even when they're kids, because guys start having discussions with older folk about marriage when they are much older, when they're in their 20s or even getting to their 30s, if not their 30s. The discussion of marriage for men is usually when you are already an adult and you're set up, or you're setting yourself up, and you're planning to have some sort of a future with a couple of people, which is usually a wife and some kids. So that's when the whole discussion of marriage can be brought up. But before that, it's not common for men to have the discussion with even young boys about getting married, because it's you're too young, you don't need to worry about that. So it's kind of need to know basis when you really need to know it, as far as discussing it with the old folk. But with women, you will hear the discussions about marriage. You'll have games that are based on marriage. Even though guys will be there, they'll kind of just play like a fatherly role. But women are very into the fantasy of it. They'll talk about how a wedding is a woman's best day, blah, blah, blah. So it is very common to see that. But in and around all of that, what people don't get is that men want marriage. Hell, even boys want to get married. And you'll sort of notice that in certain nuggets of time where you hear like a boy busy talking about how he is going to make the girl that he likes or the girl that's a really good friend to him his wife or his girlfriend. Like, that's when you realize that there's guys that actually do want relationships. And these are kids that are like 3, 4, 5 years old, and they'll sort of talk about it because they see their parents doing that. They think that, say for example, if it's a healthy relationship and both people love each other, it's like, oh, mommy and daddy are such great friends, even I want to make my friend my wife. And you'll hear stuff like that from kids when they're very, very young. They may not understand the concept of marriage or, all of the other stuff that adults do, but they can idolize what it is that they see, provided that it looks good to them. So it is something that men want even from when they're very, very young boys. Then because women are expected to want it, and because it's something that's kind of drilled into women from like a very young age, it is something that I feel more and more women nowadays that I interact with are kind of shying away from, because not only are they expected to want it, but they tend to be abused if they don't have it after a certain point in time, which is usually around about the 30s. Like when babes are in their 30s, that's when people now start talking about, you need to find someone, you need to get married. And those are the things that kind of start to affect a lot of women, because as they get into their late 20s, as they get into their 30s, which is also around about the time when their careers are busy taking off, they seem to be doing pretty well on their own, and a bunch of them might be single. The whole idea of, you need to find someone and get married now can start to be a bit of a pain, because you're pressuring them to look for a partner. And as they're feeling that pressure, whether it's external, whether it's their own internal pressure for themselves, they're also trying to deal with a dating market that will not only want to treat them a certain type of way, of which, some of them have gone through the more negative sides of the dating market, character development and everything, but also the fact that there's guys that will listen to them talk about wanting to be independent and wanting to have something nice for themselves, and they talk about how they should reduce themselves to just being the idea of a wife. Or if they don't give them a chance, they're going to grow old and then no one's going to want them. And then they're going to struggle trying to get married. And those sorts of negative comments are basically weaponizing the idea of getting married, the idea of marriage on women to kind of make them feel bad. And using that, or should I say abusing the idea of getting married on women, has kind of started to have its own ripple effects, because I hear more and more women nowadays not being open to the idea of getting married. And the more I hear that, the more it kind of starts to make me feel a little bit uncomfortable, because these are some of the women who, when they were like 21, 22, 23, they just wanted to get a great guy that they can, have a great relationship with. And maybe somewhere along the line, not that they're thinking about it per se, but somewhere along the line, they'd want to settle down with said dude. Kind of the same way it was being discussed in the earlier bit where Adam Lane Smith was talking about how they could give up all of that dick just for one great partner that they could do life with. But over time and after a bit of character development here and there, you start hearing them talk about how they don't even want to get married anymore, or they're not looking forward to marriage and shit. And you suddenly start to realize that there's women that are checking out of not just the dating market, but even the idea of getting married. And the other thing that will make that worse is the stories of married women today, or the stories of women in marriages today. Not that this is something that happens everywhere, but you'll hear a lot of the negative stories being pushed around, especially on social media, and the idea of getting married starts to seem like less and less of a good idea. There was the statistics that were released not too long ago on the domestic abuse cases and the femicide cases, and a good chunk of them were coming from husbands. So you look at the gap between husbands and boyfriends, because boyfriends came a close second. You look at the gap that husbands gave boyfriends, Like, I feel like you could fit a bunch of the other categories that come under boyfriends, and I don't know if you would even match the graph on where the femicide cases that come from husbands was really reaching, because it was huge. It was actually quite big. So you have cases like that. You have the idea of the understanding girlfriend or the understanding wife, which is a very demonized idea of a meek, caring partner that basically cares for and submits to a man that treats her like shit. Then you also have the idea of just basically being in that marriage, or carrying that family all on your own, while the man is kind of just doing his thing, which doesn't sound very good. And you look at these cases, you look at these stories, you look at these ideologies that are passed around, especially on social media, which are very negative, and you start to see more and more women not only claiming that marriage is a scam, but wanting out of marriage even before they've had a chance to actually attempt it. Like, there's so many women nowadays that talk about how they wouldn't want to get married, or how, even though they might have wanted to get married before, they'd much rather chase their career, because at least even though they lose that, they can have money, they can travel the world and shit, as opposed to a partner that could possibly beat and or kill you. So when you get to a point like that, you have to realize that maybe we've been selling a very bad idea of marriage to women, such that now they're pulling out of it, and maybe we need to start changing course. Maybe we need to start making it more enticing for women than ever before. Now, of course, there was the whole discussion of divorce and, the potential for women to take half of your shit, blah, 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 which, depending on what part of the world you are, that may or may not be true. Even the amount that could be taken may or may not necessarily be half. But I feel like we need to start making the idea of marriage more enticing to women, so that more of them can want to get married. Because at the end of the day, you can say that you don't really care because you're a guy, but hey, like, the people that you intend on marrying aren't going to be guys, not unless you're gay. And of which, if you're gay, depending on where you are, you may or may not be able to do it. So it's women that you're going to want to marry, or should I say a woman. And that a woman that you are supposedly looking for is going to be among the many, and a bunch of them might continuously keep on saying that you shouldn't get married, or marriage is a scam, blah blah. So maybe, just maybe, making it seem a little bit more enticing and stop demonizing those who haven't married will probably make it easier and better for a lot more women to be like, what, maybe I should try out marriage. Maybe it's not about the pressure of being married, but rather the possibility of great things that can happen once the two of you are married. Because if we don't do that and women completely check out of the dating market, niggas out here are going to be the ones suffering, not the women. The women have clearly demonstrated that they can have their friend groups and they can go and travel the world and enjoy shit, and they will be happy without us. Us guys are the ones that are still doing shit out here for pussy. So if we probably started making the idea of marriage a little bit more enticing to women, just the same way I've been saying before that we need to make it a little bit more enticing to the men, then maybe people might actually want to get married a little bit more again. But to kind of conclude all of this, because I kind of did flop around a couple of different, questions and shit, the main question was, who wants marriage more? And to be very honest, I can't really say who wants it more, but I do know that most men believe that they have to do it, and quite a number of them actually do want to get married. With the women though, up until we can make marriage enticing again, I don't think there's that many women that want it just as bad as they used to before. And that's something that we should probably look into. Although, then again, maybe I could be wrong about this. Maybe my information is clouded and I don't know shit. Either way, I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open on IG, it is at the breaktime_podcast. On Facebook, it is at the breaktime podcast. On X, it is at bagakad, and on Bluesky, it is at the breaktimepod.bsky.social. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.
But what I believe is that if you put a pastor and a prostitute in one room, one is likely to convert the other.